What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday, a story was making the rounds with the PlayStation 5 and a potential design flaw that was found when it comes to how Sony is handling the liquid metal inside of the system, and it's gotten to the point where people are questioning how they should even set up their PlayStation system in the first place. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a brand new Xbox controller that was unveiled at CES that actually adds a screen to it. Oh, and we're also going to be taking a look at the Vita as it just became even easier to hack, but does Sony even really care anymore? Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below, and we're going to start today with Arcade1Up at CES. They did have some stuff to announce, and really there's maybe one arcade cabinet that was at least interesting, which we can see that here. It's the Wheel of Fortune Casino K Deluxe. Obviously for Wheel of Fortune fans, and it's very unique looking compared to their more traditional arcade setups, and they'll do this from time to time, but obviously you can see the big wheel at the top, the dual speakers, so that's, like I said, good for Wheel of Fortune fans there. They also showed off the Infinity Game Board. It's a smaller version than the Infinity Game Table, this being one that's a bit more portable, take room to room, and you can play over 100 games on it. They have Uno that they were showing off for the example. As for their traditional arcade cabinets, they mostly showed up with deluxe versions, which I believe just has like the light up marquee, Wi-Fi connection, leaderboards, those kind of things. This is for Miss Pac-Man and Galaga, Mortal Kombat 2, Miss Pac-Man, and then Pac-Man again. These coming out spring 2023. Unfortunately, nothing when it comes to Time Crisis, which is the big arcade cabinet that I'm hoping gets revealed, as it was apparently leaked months ago. So that's the one I'm mostly keeping my eye out for, and that would probably pull me back into Arcade1Up and what they're offering here. Also, we do have Fire Emblem Engage coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm actually getting kind of excited for it, and we just had previews go live yesterday. These covered up until Chapter 8, so apparently that's just scratching the surface of what's going to be a very lengthy RPG. And Three Houses, I thought was good, but I feel like I've kind of seen enough of the school setting, and it does appear that we're getting more of a fantasy military kind of setting here with Fire Emblem Engage, and that's what I think I'll be a bit more interested in than Three Houses. But the previews so far look really good. They basically said, hey, it's going to be a good strategy RPG as you would expect out of a Fire Emblem game. They also went over all the different characters from previous Fire Emblems. They'll be part of it, and what we did see with Digital Foundry going over some of the visuals and the upgrades from Three Houses that, yeah, struggled at times, especially when it comes to the aliasing that was just everywhere. So I'm looking forward to Fire Emblem Engage, picking that one up later on this month, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it a bit more on the podcast, but go ahead and check out some of the previews because there's a lot of gameplay and content out there that just hit the internet all at once. Oh, and in the ongoing situation of Xbox versus the world, seemingly, when it comes to the Activision Blizzard acquisition, it appears we have a bit of an extension when it comes to the CMA, which we can see this posted up over on purexbox.com. They said the CMA has decided to extend its investigation period, meaning any ruling on Microsoft's Activision Blizzard purchase will now arrive by April 26th, whereas it was going to be March 1st. We're so close to at least getting to, I don't know, the conclusion of some kind, but they do say they aim to complete the inquiry as soon as possible and in advance of this date. So it seems like we still have months to go before this is hopefully resolved. That's my biggest thing now. I feel like we've been in this state of unknown for a while now with this whole deal. While most of us believe it'll go through, there's still some bit of doubt in there. So if anything, I'd like it to wrap up so we can be done talking about it, because it just feels like it goes on and on. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the PlayStation 5 and an apparent design flaw that was discovered within the system when it comes to the liquid metal and essentially how Sony is managing it. We can see this post up over on wololo.net, and this is an entire article where they mostly compiled many different looks inside of the system over time when it's in the vertical orientation. They say you're killing your PS5 by using it vertically due to a design flaw by Sony, according to hardware experts. For example, we can see 68 Logic or Console Systems saying, do not put your PS5 upright here is the result. The liquid moves and the freezes are there. There's also one from Ben showcasing a similar outcome where apparently as the system is vertical for a certain length of time, it could be months, could be even years now that the system has been out on the market for just over 2 years, that the liquid metal could indeed spread and essentially leak out through that seal that Sony did try to at least incorporate alongside of it. And I say try because you're going to have defects in systems regardless, and liquid metal, it is a risky move no matter how you look at it because it doesn't necessarily solidify and remain in place. It is consistently malleable and liquid. So yes, the potential for leaks outside of a seal like Sony incorporated here could happen. Now, I'll also point out from my own experience in repair shops, we would discover different defects and issues within systems just over time from seeing it many times over and over again as repairs come in. And most of the times we would know before it was made public or really put out there because it kind of starts on the ground level for repairs and then it sort of works its way out there to where more and more people are saying, hey, my system is freezing. I don't know why I sent it to Sony, but as people take it to repair stores and they open them up and they see that the liquid metal has maybe gotten out around that seal, that, yeah, that would be a problem. Remember, this can also cause overheating as liquid metal kind of drains out from where it's supposed to be, locking the top of the chip, the die, to its heatsink to disperse heat. If you have air gaps fill in there, you could have the system shut down because the temperature just gets too high. We already know that Sony is pushing the chip pretty well with some of the clock speeds that they have for it. So it's not hard to believe that this could happen as Sony is working to really just keep liquid within one space as we've seen through different teardowns with foam and other pieces around it. Now, does this mean that keeping it in a vertical orientation will guarantee that your system will malfunction and liquid metal will spill out onto your board? Not necessarily. Here's the thing with systems that sometimes people tend to forget. Not everyone is going to be built exactly the same. They do their best to get it down to a certain setup to where it's within reason, but you'll have some margin of error and certain seals won't be as good as others. But I mean, we're going to see this with systems as we go along, as there is just a percentage that tends to be defective out of the factory. The big thing is if this becomes a problem to where it's 10, 20, 30%, the red ring being the biggest example of a huge failure rate. I don't necessarily know if we're here with this yet. It's taken a couple of years for this to really come to light now, and while I think it's something to monitor over time, I think we do need more data around it. But if you want to be safe and not fight gravity with your PS5, sure, you can put it into a horizontal orientation, if anything, for peace of mind. I will say, though, it's pretty obvious that Sony understood that this could happen with how much of a seal they attempted to put around it, and I'll be curious to see going forward when we see this apparent revision for the PlayStation 5, which will probably look different so it can incorporate the disk drive as an optional attachment. If maybe they do play around with the seal and we'll be able to kind of compare to the previous model that we're seeing now have some issues with liquid metal getting out. Next up, let's talk about a new controller that was shown at CES, and it's for the PC and Xbox. Take a look at this. This is posted up over on the ASUS website with the Republic of Gamers. I think it's Raikiri Pro controller. And yes, it has a built-in OLED display right at the top there. It's a 1.3-inch screen. It's not like a massive resolution or anything like that. And it's fairly small. It's not like a huge display that you're gonna have like the game itself on, nothing there. In fact, it seems to be set up for a couple of things. Status indicators like your battery life on there, maybe switching profiles on the fly for the system you have set up in their custom application, whether it's you're setting up for a fighting game, maybe Call of Duty, or you're going to a racing game. And it can also tell you if you're muted or not with your audio, which is more useful than you would think from my experience there. They'll also have a unique look with custom animations for it. So if you could make up your own animation to customize it a bit further, That'd be kind of neat to have that. It's certainly more of a novelty in this form. We would need a major platform holder like a Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft to be out of the gate with a screen built into the controller so that developers know it's there by default, whereas in this case, the Raikiri Pro, which is it's going to be an expensive controller, is certainly going to be more of a niche thing that most developers probably won't have a heavy focus on. They do also mention tri-mode connectivity, so we'll have USB-C as a wired connection if you just want to plug it in, and unfortunately, it appears at this time that's the only way they're promising you to be able to use this for your Xbox, so it's just going to be through wired mode. Otherwise, low latency, 2.4 gigahertz RF connection, and Bluetooth mode, so you'll be able to use it on your PC, of course, through wireless connection. They'd also, on the back, have different buttons. They have 4 left and right buttons. They be programmed as macro setup for in-game commands, and they also have on-the-fly joystick sensitivity. They do have step triggers, they call them, or really you can just play around with how much of a throw there is for your different triggers. Maybe you're playing a game like Call of Duty with the semi-automatic weapons and you want to be able to press it as fast as possible, or maybe you want to move over to a full racing game where you want to have the entire analog press for acceleration and deceleration. You can do that. They have premium sound, so they have a built-in ESS DAC and 3.5 millimeter earphone jack and a mute button. Now, they did not detail anything when it comes to pricing or release date, and that's typically the trend at CES, just showing off cool stuff, and the price tag, don't worry about that, or even when it comes to market. This is something that I would probably put around the $150 to $200 mark. It has an OLED screen, it has RGB lighting, that's a big thing there, but this is, to me, being placed alongside of the Xbox Elite controller, the DualSense Edge controller, or those SCUF controllers. So me personally, probably about $200 is what I place on this. And that OLED screen certainly puts it in a league of its own when it comes to that kind of functionality. The only other controller I can think of right now off the top of my head is that Hyperkin controller, the Duke controller, and the only point of that was to play a custom animation for the original Xbox when you started it up. This one has a bit more functionality to it. So it's certainly a controller I would like to check out a bit more, and I'll keep my eye out to see when we'll be able to get it so I can pick it up for a future Tech Wave. Next up, let's talk about a sale that is currently live for the Switch over on the eShop. We can see this posted up over on their sales and deals page. This is their New Year's sale. It is currently live and will be running until the 15th of January, right at midnight. And the thing that I noticed here is we do have first-party games on sale, and I like to alert people when that happens because it's not typical specifically on the digital side. You can have retailers drop prices all day long, but this would be technically from Nintendo here. So Paper Mario the Origami King at $42. It's still a fun game. It's one that I can recommend definitely at about $40. And The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, same deal there, down to $42. We do have Persona 5 Royal, though, which is a great deal at $42. Just the amount of time you get out of it, I have to recommend that one, absolutely. Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope, but it's the gold edition. The regular one, I feel like is fine until we get more info, especially on that expansion pass. We also have Fire Emblem Warriors down to $42. Sonic Frontiers down to $42. Hey, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker at $28. That's actually a really fun game. I like that one. I can recommend that. Doom Eternal at $15. Celeste at $5. Really, Celeste is $5. That's a good pickup. Stardew Valley there at $10. Hollow Knight at $7.50. Tunic only got a 10% drop at $27. I would have liked to see that one a bit more, but Tunic, I did enjoy that one quite a bit. Dragon Quest Builders 2 down to $35. Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition. If you have not played this title, certainly one you want to pick up if you enjoy games like Bayonetta as an example. That one down to $10. If you just picked up a Switch OLED, maybe for the holidays, I have to recommend Tetris Effect Connected. While it's really cool they have the visuals intertwined with the audio and the music and all this, I mean, it looks really, really good on the OLED display for the Switch. And then Castlevania Advanced Collection, $12 for that collection of titles. Absolute steal. So always fun to see these different sales go live, and it's great because obviously that with the holidays, there are probably a lot of new Switch owners out there. So let me know what you were picking up in these sales, and of course, leave some suggestions down below. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the PlayStation Vita and how it's actually become easier than ever to modify the system, soft mod it, open it up to running all kinds of homebrew, which yes, does include the possibility of piracy and stuff. But for me with the Vita, it's pretty clear that Sony just doesn't care about it anymore. It's a legacy device for them. So when a system gets to this point in its life to where, I mean, the platform holder's trying to shut down the storefront for it, it's like, who really cares? But we can see this post up over on DualShockers, where they say cunning hackers have developed and deployed a new PS Vita hacking method that provides PS Vita and PS TV owners, which, by the way, the TV might be the big one to modify because you can then run games that were basically locked from being able to run on that device stock, so keep that in mind. It's the easiest ever method for installing custom firmware on their consoles, and it's all done within the system's browser and without the need for a PC connection. And the browser is used quite a bit when it comes to opening up many different systems, and we've talked about in the past why Nintendo didn't have a browser for the Switch and why we're seeing Sony kind of back away from having just open internet browsers on their platforms. It's because of stuff like this, where you can modify straight from the system without too much issue. And the Vita has been a bit of an undertaking when it comes to modifying it, and it just kind of seems like they've worked around that. And I guess the question now is, will Sony all of a sudden care about the Vita to go back and patch this out? That through like one of those stability patches where they don't really tell you what they did, and it could have been something as simple as trying to circumvent being able to use your web browser to break the system wide open. For me, it's not even worth the hassle necessarily, unless they find that there is some major security exploit that could leave the Vita and somehow become a concern for their current platform. But for now, the Vita, yeah, it seems to be pretty easy to modify. It's also pretty easy to find the instructions for this. I'll leave that up to you if you're curious. But hey, it's nice to know you can just modify the Vita straight from the system itself using, well, just the web browser. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, if you have a PS5, is it currently set up in a vertical or horizontal position? 64% say vertical and 36% say horizontal. That's about what I expected, mostly because the PS5, I think just how large it is, probably works better standing up for most people if you're at a desk, or even most entertainment centers, we have to even put it off to the side because it won't fit in one of the cabinets you have for your entertainment center. I have mine horizontal because I have like one of those shelf entertainment centers and it just happens to fit in there. It's not the most roomy fit because of how big the system is, but it works. And if you look at the PS5, just the way it's set up, it certainly looks like a device they had at the factory level as being set up in the vertical orientation. I don't necessarily think we have enough data to support the fact that you have to have it horizontally or the thing will eventually break. But, I mean, we at least are hearing some accounts of this, so we'll just have to keep an eye on it as we go forward over the coming years. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Jace, who says, I think that the tweet by Jason Schreier shows just how ridiculous the average AAA game expectation is right now. The level of graphics and untold amount of gameplay is obviously not achievable anymore. I think big studios need to focus more on smaller and easier to develop games so that we can experiment more and have games we wouldn't get otherwise. And we should definitely be willing to try more indie games because they're the devs who are making the most unique and interesting experiences in the modern day of gaming. I would absolutely agree with that. If you're getting bored of AAA games now, go take a look at an indie section on any of the storefronts for Nintendo, Xbox, for PlayStation, on Steam, and you'd be shocked at some of the unique ideas that these smaller studios are coming up with that, let's face it, inevitably the big AAA studios pull from and copy and build this big, huge game out of. But I think the issue we're running into is the expectations have gotten too high and graphics just don't age as well as gameplay. Gameplay, to me, first and foremost, should be the focus, and if visual fidelity has to suffer somewhat because of that, I don't think it's a big deal because we can go back and play games from the 8-bit or the 16-bit era and still have a blast. I can play Mega Man X every year going forward and not get bored of it or go back and say, oh, this game is terrible, look at it. No, because the gameplay is really good. 3D games, they don't age as well, I'll say, as the 2D pixel games, but still, if the gameplay is good, then you will be able to return to it and find enjoyment in it. Whereas if the focus is all about visuals, it will eventually age out. So I think there, yes, needs maybe a bit of a reset when it comes to the planning around these different games. And I hope that we do eventually get there, but I hope we don't get there because the entire industry has completely broken since our expectations and budgets are just getting way too high. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was the PlayStation 5 and this potential design flaw that was discovered with the liquid metal. Are you concerned about it, or you think it's just kind of a small percentage that are going to be affected going forward? And then also, what about this Asus Republic of Gamers Xbox controller with a screen? Do you think going forward, maybe in another generation, we could see a controller have that Dreamcast-like setup with a screen right there in the middle? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.